One Sunday morning, on the third market day, a king and queen gave birth to the most handsome prince the village of Umiri had ever seen. His charm was so captivating that people from far and wide flocked to Umiri just to catch a glimpse of him. The news of his extraordinary looks spread like wildfire, drawing visitors from different kingdoms to witness his beauty. However, tragedy struck one fateful day when the prince, at the tender age of 10, went to the river for a swim without the knowledge of his parents. A few hours later, his servant, whom he had instructed to wait at the edge of the river, brought his lifeless body back home. The king and queen, filled with worry, summoned every native doctor they knew in hopes of reviving their beloved son. While one of the native doctors managed to bring Prince Ali back to life, he wasn't able to help the scar that changed his handsomeness. The prince was resuscitated, but his face looked ugly. His parents didn't mind, as long as he was alive and healthy. From that day forward, the prince always wore a mask to cover his face. Rumors went round that the prince, whom was very handsome before, had now become ugly. Some said his face made them want to vomit. The prince wasn't saddened by this. Instead, he developed a deep hatred towards the river and all things related to water. Few days after his recovery, he stopped drinking water and anything made from water. He gradually started becoming thinner, and his parents, worried that their child would die, started begging him. His mother cried and cried every day before he decided to start eating food and drinking water again. After his near-death incident at the river, Prince Ali vowed to kill and suffer any living creatures underwater. He would prepare and take some of his servants to the river just to catch fishes and other creatures that lives underwater. And whenever he catches them, he would come back home and roast them. He derived joy in watching them make noise while they are being roasted. He would laugh anytime he feels the animal was in pain. This continued for years. When Prince Ali became king, he made a rule that no one in the whole of Umiri was allowed to marry any living creature from the water, because he heard that some people got their children from the river goddess and some villages get married to mermaids. He didn't want such things to happen in his kingdom because of his hate for water. This policy devastated some villagers who were already preparing for their wedding ceremonies, leaving them no choice but to let go of their beloved partners. But their hatred for King Ali increased. They made sure they always say to his hearing how wicked and unkind he was and how ugly he was. But King Ali would always ignore those words whenever he heard them. His hatred wasn't for them, he would always tell himself. The king was aging and nobody wanted to marry him. He tried to forcefully marry one chief's daughter, but even the chief himself wouldn't give his daughter's hand in marriage to him. And that was because everybody feared his scar would affect his unborn children, so they avoided him. One day, when the chiefs were discussing in the palace, Chief Adamu suddenly stood up in front of everyone. Looking at the king, he said, "Your Highness, I am sorry, but I don't want my daughter to have any issue with anything related to Anogbanje." The boldness of Chief Adamu that day shocked all the chiefs in the palace, but King Ali didn't argue or punish him. Instead, he intensified his search for more underwater creatures to subject them to suffering. This time, he devised a plan to entice the villagers. He announced that anyone who brought him a large living creature from the water would be rewarded handsomely. Even though the villagers despised King Ali for his policies, they liked him for his generosity. They knew the reward would be a huge one, so they began searching for living creatures that lives in the water. One day, a young handsome man from the village named Haruna went and sat on the edge of the river and started singing. Everyone was looking at him and wondering what his problem was. Not long before he started singing, a mermaid emerged, prompting him to ensnare her in his net. Haruna immediately asked some men there to help him carry her to the palace. As they transported her to the palace, the mermaid pleaded tearfully with Haruna, making different promises. Despite her pleads, Haruna remained resolute. Haruna, without any atom of remorse, said to the mermaid, "You said I wasn't enough for you, and I can't stand you getting married to another man that is not me. I would be happy you are dead than to see you get married to another man." The mermaid was begging and crying. Tearfully, she said, "I don't want to die, Haruna. I don't want to die. Please spare my life, and I promise to remain unmarried all my life." The people who were helping Haruna carry the mermaid were surprised to hear what they were discussing. So one of them decided to ask, "Haruna, who is this mermaid, and how did you two meet?" And then Haruna began narrating to them how they met. He said, "I have known her for years now. I helped her when King Ali wanted to kill her on one of his searches. I was at the river that day, and immediately I saw the king going towards her direction. I helped her by distracting the king. She was always sitting and watching the king catch all the other creatures. And after that day, I started watching her too. I fell in love with her, but she doesn't love me. She pretended to love me only to get protection from me and to have more opportunity to watch the king. I have asked her severally what her relationship with the king was, but she would always say nothing. When I proposed marriage to her, she accepted, but that was when the king gave those orders that no one should marry or have anything to do with any living creatures underwater. When I told her the news, she was very happy. How can someone who I want to marry be happy that our marriage won't hold again? This is why I would rather see her dead than watch another man get married to her." Haruna's words echoed through the crowd, leaving them stunned and unsure of how to respond. They reluctantly led the mermaid to the palace, where the king eagerly awaited their arrival. His eyes lit up with delight at the sight of this majestic creature, far larger than any he had encountered before. The thought of seeking revenge on the river filled him with a twisted sense of satisfaction. Without hesitation, the king commanded his guards to imprison the mermaid in the dungeon without food or water. As a token of gratitude, he rewarded Haruna with a generous amount of gold, urging him to share it with those who had aided in capturing the mermaid. Haruna was filled with joy, and without any atom of feeling or attachment for the mermaid, Haruna turned to leave, and just as he was about leaving the palace, the mermaid started singing. The more she sang the song, the more it touched the king's heart, stirring emotions he couldn't comprehend. Intrigued, he inquired about the source of the captivating song. Haruna revealed that it was the mermaid that was singing, and it was the song she taught him. It was their song. The king didn't understand what he meant, but since it didn't concern him, he didn't ask further. So Haruna left the palace. The next day, the king went to see the mermaid. When he got there, he mistakenly looked into her eyes and saw a vision, but it wasn't clear enough for him to understand it. He quickly ordered his guards to bring the mermaid out and set a fire because he wanted to roast her. They brought the mermaid out and set the fire, and it started burning her. She was crying and pleading with the king to stop, but he didn't want to listen. He was just laughing and feeling very happy, seeing the mermaid shouting and crying and begging for mercy. When he felt the mermaid was almost giving up, he asked them to stop and take her back to the dungeon. He didn't want her to die just like that. He wanted her to suffer more and wanted to feel satisfied before killing her. As they escorted the weakened mermaid back to the dungeon, she pleaded with one of the guards for water. However, fearing the consequences, the guard chose to ignore her desperate pleas. Gradually losing consciousness, she continued to express her need for water. Concerned, one of the guards rushed to inform the king that the mermaid was on the brink of death, and the king went with him to the dungeon. When they got there, he mistakenly looked straight into her eyes again and saw the same vision. This time, it was a bit clear, but he still didn't remember anything. Anxious to know what the vision was, he ordered the guards to get the mermaid water to drink and make sure she doesn't die, and he hurriedly left. That night, he kept wondering what the vision was. He was disturbed about what he kept seeing whenever he looked into the mermaid's eyes. He kept worrying until he drifted off to sleep, waking up to the enchanting song from the mermaid. The song touched him, and he noticed his heart was beating really fast. He woke up and rushed to the dungeon where the mermaid was. The closer he got to the dungeon, the more his heart kept beating faster. He was becoming fond of her, but didn't know what to call such thing. The mermaid stopped singing immediately she saw him, but he urged her to continue. She smiled and looked into his eyes. They both kept staring at each other for a while before a guard tapped the king on his shoulder and asked if he was all right. And the king immediately left the place. He was convinced that there was something more about the mermaid, so he instructed the guards to give her water and food and to always keep an eye on her. The king couldn't concentrate the whole day. He kept thinking about the vision and the reason his heart was always beating faster whenever he hears the mermaid sing. When he couldn't control his thoughts, he ordered the guards to leave him alone with the mermaid. When they left, he moved closer to the mermaid and inquired about her name. And she said, "My name is Zainab." "That's a lovely name," King Ali said almost immediately. The king couldn't believe what he had just said to the mermaid. He was supposed to despise everything underwater, yet here he was, showering her with compliments. As they continued their conversation, he couldn't help but feel an indescribable happiness. It was as if a weight had been lifted off his shoulders. King Ali found himself visiting the mermaid every day, engaging in deep discussions with her. During one of their encounters, she pleaded with him to remove his masks and feel free whenever he was with her, and he did. To his surprise, she called him handsome and smiled warmly. Her words touched him deeply. "She's not scared of me. She didn't call me ugly, and she doesn't think I'm ugly," the king thought to himself, realizing that she saw past his appearance and accepted him for who he truly was. The following day, the king instructed his guards to provide the mermaid with more food and fulfill her every desire. The guards were taken aback by this sudden change, but they remained silent. Some were glad to see the king happier than ever before, while others pondered over the reason behind his newfound joy. Ever since he started conversing with the mermaid, King Ali felt a sense of peace and joy within himself. He had finally found inner peace. Each night, he would eagerly anticipate their next discussion, falling asleep with thoughts of what they would talk about. His happiness grew with each passing day. The next day, when he went to see the mermaid, he discovered she was sad. He moved closer to her and asked, "What bothers you, beautiful one?" Zainab turned, and looking at him, she said, "I want you to look straight into my eyes and not remove it until you see everything clearly." King Ali obliged, and as he stared into her eyes, the vision he had always been seeing unfolded before him. He saw his younger self, and immediately the memories of the water incident of when he was 10 years old became crystal clear. That day, he had gone to the river to swim, and when he got there, he saw a younger girl swimming inside the river too. And almost immediately he entered the river and started swimming. The river goddess came out, and Prince Ali started drowning. The river goddess took him, and immediately she wanted to turn back. Zainab begged her to leave the prince and take her instead. "Please, spare his life. Take me instead. His parents would die if anything happens to him. And I like him too," she said. "As you wish, young girl," the river goddess said. The river goddess touched Prince Ali's face with her tail and immediately took Zainab inside the river and turned her into a mermaid. That was when Prince Ali's guards came and took him. Unknown to King Ali, his parents had wanted a child for so long, and his mother, the queen, went to the river goddess to beg her for a child. The river goddess agreed to give her a child on the condition that the child must never come close to the river. If not, she would take him back. That was why, when Prince Ali was born, he was very handsome. Consumed by remorse, King Ali turned away from Zainab, his eyes welling up with tears. It was an unimaginable revelation that the girl he had mistreated was the very one who had sacrificed her own life to save his. Overwhelmed by guilt, he immediately left her side and went to his room, where he wept uncontrollably. The following day, the king returned to the dungeon, hoping to find the mermaid, but to his dismay, she was nowhere to be found. He called all his guards, but they were all asleep. Furious, he woke them up angrily and asked where the mermaid was, but none of them knew where she went to. They started searching for the mermaid, but she was nowhere to be found. King Ali ordered them to search the whole village and also asked them to go to the river and search for her too, but their efforts proved fruitless. King Ali's heart sank with sadness. The only person who had seen past his outer appearance, the only one who had saved his life, had vanished without a trace. He was haunted by the fact that he could not return the favor and rescue her in return. To be continued. If you liked part 1, comment continue, and please like, subscribe and share. I wish you all love. Bye.